He wrote one of the most beloved underdog stories in film history in just 3.5 days, broke and nearly homeless, refusing to sell the script unless he got to star in it himself. 50 years later, Rocky Balboa is still one of the most iconic characters ever put on screen, quoted, parodied, and celebrated across generations who weren't even alive when the original film came out. But behind the muscles, the movie money, and the legendary comeback story Sylvester Stallone has built his entire career on, the man himself has quietly survived a birth injury doctors once said would define his whole life, buried a son far too young, and is now facing his own body slowly giving out after decades of injuries he refused to properly treat. If stories like this one are your thing, go ahead and subscribe, and let's go back to the very beginning, because Stallone's story starts with a struggle before he'd even taken his first breath. Michael Sylvester Stallone is born in New York City in July 1946. During a complicated delivery, forceps slip and sever nerves on the left side of his tiny face, leaving him with permanent partial paralysis. The slightly drooping eye, the distinctive slurred, lopsided way of speaking that would follow him his entire life and, ironically, become one of the most recognizable voices in Hollywood. Doctors at the time have little to offer beyond a diagnosis. There's no fixing what the forceps damaged. Kids at school mock him relentlessly for the way he talks, and the way half his face doesn't quite move like the other half, nicknames that follow him from one school to the next. His home life offers little shelter from that cruelty. His father is by most accounts harsh, and at times physically abusive. Running a beauty school while pushing his son hard and rarely offering the warmth a struggling kid might need, and young Sylvester bounces between relatives and foster care during periods when his parents can't or won't care for him themselves. It's a childhood that leaves him, by his own later admission, desperate to prove himself to a world that had already written him off as slow or strange before he'd even had the chance to speak for himself. Acting becomes his escape, though success takes agonizingly long to arrive. He bounces between small roles, adult film work he later says he took purely out of desperation, and long stretches of unemployment. By his mid-20s, married and with a baby on the way, his son Sage, born in 1976, Stallone is close to broke. At one point reportedly having to sell his beloved dog, Butkus, because he can't afford to feed him, a decision he said still haunts him decades later. Then, in 1975, after watching a little-known boxer named Chuck Wepner go the distance against Muhammad Ali, Stallone writes the script for Rocky in roughly 3 or 4 days flat, fueled by nothing but conviction and desperation. Producers want to buy it and cast a bigger, bankable star instead. Stallone refuses every offer unless he's the one playing Rocky Balboa himself, a gamble that could have ended his career before it truly began. It doesn't. Rocky wins Best Picture at the 1,977 Oscars. And Sylvester Stallone, the kid mocked for his slurred speech and written off by his own father, becomes one of the biggest movie stars on the planet, a transformation so sudden and so complete that even he has admitted decades later, it sometimes still feels unreal. If you didn't already know just how close Stallone came to losing everything before Rocky ever got made, that's exactly the kind of story worth sticking around for. Because his real life away from the cameras, once the fame and the fortune arrive, gets a lot harder from here rather than easier. Through the 80s and 90s, Stallone becomes a full-blown action icon. Rambo, Cliffhanger, Cobra, a string of sequels that make Rocky and John Rambo two of the most bankable characters in movie history, cementing his reputation as a genuine box office force decade after decade. But the same body he's built his entire career on starts quietly collecting a lifetime of damage. By his own admission, decades later, Stallone insists on doing many of his own stunts, refusing doubles even when directors beg him to use one, treating every fall and every punch as something only he could sell convincingly on camera. While directing Expendables, he takes a brutal fall, attempting take after take of a single stunt, feeling something in his back snap during the impact. "I never recovered from that film," he'll later admit on his family's reality show. After that, it was never physically the same. Surgeons eventually insert a metal plate into his neck and perform spinal fusion surgery, fusing vertebrae together to stop the damage from spreading further. His wife, Jennifer Flavin, later describes each of his surgeries as a scary time for the whole family, admitting Stallone hates people knowing just how many operations he's actually needed, preferring the world keep seeing him as indestructible, rather than as a man quietly held together by hardware. Then, in July 2012, tragedy hits in a way no amount of physical toughness can prepare a parent for. Sage Stallone, his eldest son from his first marriage, is found dead in his Los Angeles home at just 36 years old after not being heard from for several days. Rumors immediately swirl about a possible overdose, splashed across tabloids within hours. The coroner ultimately rules the cause as coronary artery disease brought on by atherosclerosis, unrelated to any substance abuse. A fact that takes weeks to fully clear up in the public record, even as the family grieves in the meantime. Stallone, devastated, begs the public simply to leave his son's memory in peace. This agonizing loss will be felt for the rest of our lives, he says in a statement at the time. Sage was our first child and the center of our universe. He'll later admit in his 2023 Netflix documentary Sly that his relationship with Sage had been complicated for years, strained by Stallone's own divorce from Sage's mother, Sasha Chak, back in 1985, and the long stretches of absence that came with a career built on being everywhere except home, a father who could write himself into blockbuster after blockbuster, but who, by his own account, struggled to be as present as he wanted to be for the son who idolized him. Even now, at nearly 80, Stallone can't fully outrun what decades of stunts and one particular tragedy have cost him. In December 2025, he's photographed walking the Kennedy Center Honors red carpet leaning on a cane, still recovering from a recent back surgery. His wife Jennifer by his side the entire evening as he's celebrated as one of the ceremony's honorees. Just weeks later, in January 2026, he posts a gym video that stuns fans in the opposite direction, visibly muscular, still lifting, still pushing through pain. Most men half his age would use as an excuse to stop entirely. Every year it gets harder and harder, he writes in the caption. But that's why you gotta push harder and harder. Blood, sweat, and tears. Fans flood the comments in disbelief, several calling him a living legend. Proof that age really might just be a number for the man who once turned a 3-day script into a 50-year franchise. It's the same defiant refusal to slow down that got him through poverty, mockery, and a body that's been rebuilt with metal plates and fused vertebrae. The same stubbornness that once convinced a room full of skeptical producers to bet everything on an unknown actor with a crooked smile and a script about a nobody who goes the distance. The boy who couldn't fully control half his own face, who slept in bus stations and sold his own dog just to eat, who bet his entire career on a 3-day script nobody believed in, who buried a son far too young and quietly carries that grief to this day, and who has spent the back half of his life rebuilding a body that stunts and time have both tried to take apart piece by piece. That's the real story behind Sylvester Stallone as he turns 80. Not just Rocky, not just Rambo, but a man who has spent his whole life refusing to stay down for the count, on screen or off it, a philosophy he's summed up himself in exactly the way you'd expect. Get knocked down, get back up, and keep punching. And that's what's really behind Sylvester Stallone's story at nearly 80 years old. The pain nobody saw, the tragedy that never fully healed, and the fight that never actually stopped. Did any of this surprise you? Let me know in the comments. And subscribe to catch the next story right here.